days couldn't even pay for an hour of editing time was quite a lot. Anyway, so this is the comparison. This was 4 years after I received funding, the one on the left, and that one is now. So you can see there's quite a change. But going down, this was the video, which is Lunchtime, and I actually pulled it up. It was in the archives of both Fox News and Channel 1 picked it up, and it's just so embarrassing to watch. So I have it on a separate window, but we can maybe watch that later. The background of it, again, was school nutrition. It was looking at this being, our daily meal, and just the quality with which we were living. And this, it gets worse, right? You have Snickers, and you have potato chips, and you have this, and this is the top of the tier. So looking at that from a student's perspective, with really cheesy editing and the BMW driving up, first scene wanting to be like all those skateboarder movies. Was the background. But also, the cool thing about being so young is we got into some really interesting situations which you wouldn't have necessarily gotten into when you're older. Like, we talked to some of the state senators, and they said things that you wouldn't even imagine. Things like, I don't think that eating food is important for someone's health. Like, I don't think that having candy in vending machines is impacting the way that people study or focus. And then the same person, actually, there's one senator in specific, he said, oh yeah, I can't eat in the cafeteria anymore because I have heart disease, right? What's interesting though is, and what I wanted to talk about is not so much that project per se, because it was quite a long time ago, but the way that project then propagated kind of the things that I do, and I've done since. It's really interesting because I feel like you give, especially for kids, for young kids, if you give them a sense of responsibility for something, like they have ownership over anything, that idea, the idea of being able to own what you're doing and take pride in what you're doing continues over and over and over and over again. And it did in my life, for sure. And I think the Lunchtime video was really the very start of that. So this was a project that I did about 2 years later. It was a new backpack that I had designed. And so we found someone from Lowell Alpine that used to work there to help sew it for me, and the idea was that it would fold into 2 pieces, and you'd be able to have access to the whole internal components. And then about 1.5 years later, after traveling to Bali with my grandmother, and learning wood carving, I came back and had this desire to do more wood carving, and that actually ended up leading to a company that created these sustainable cutting boards by salvaging scrap from all these wood mills throughout the Denver Boulder metro area, kind of packaging, repurposing them, and making something beautiful out of it. So that was the next step in that evolution. But the whole idea was, at each point, because I hadn't kind of gotten my feet wet, the idea of taking on these tasks and trying to do something that was bigger and more encouraging and more exciting than before felt totally feasible. And it starts with $300, and I always like to say that every project that I've tried to work on has tried to be an order of magnitude larger than the next one. So the cutting boards and the inlays that we were doing were an order of magnitude bigger than the Lunchtime video. And so those are a couple of the pieces that we created. This used inlay from old piano keys we salvaged to make this beautiful ivory inlay with this wood that we had salvaged from around town. And that in turn fed into more kind of creative endeavors like guitars and knives and whatnot. So then, fast forward a couple more years, and I went to school, and I was lucky enough to get into Stanford, which was no doubt in part due to a lot of the things that I worked on. I actually put the Lunchtime video as one of my first entries in my application. And so this was a project that I worked on there. Things kind of shifted from the artistic side and the kind of craftsmanship side to more of the engineering side and the business side. And so this was a mechatronics project that me and a few buddies of mine worked on. It was a robot that we were building for a class, and it actually got first place out of the entire graduate school of engineering, which was pretty cool. So that was a great design. The best part about it was that we just used rubber bands from our drawer to make all those hinges and things work. And then years later, business. This was an idea that we came up with. It was the concept to make it really easy for property owners to create listings for their properties. So really quite simple. It was just a plug-and-play kind of drag-and-drop model before Squarespace and Wix and any of these sites existed. But again, the idea is not necessarily that any one of these ideas and concepts is so strong and powerful, but it's that there's this progression, right? It's that you start with something small, And over time it builds and it builds and it builds and it builds. And all of these things that I was working on, this was a Kickstarter campaign that I did years later. And they were only possible because there were so many amazing people that came together around to actually make them happen. I mean, every time I watch these videos, I blush so much in the face because I look like such a small little child, you know, with such big plans and big grand ambitions. And I think people see that and they resonate with it. But the biggest thing is that because people are willing to give a chance to these ideas, they can become big. This was my sophomore year of college, and I designed this bike mount for a smartphone. You attach a smartphone to your bicycle, you could, you know, navigate as you rode, and it raised $120,000 on Kickstarter, which is a small step up from the $300 for Lunchtime. But that's the whole idea, is that, you know, one thing grows to the next thing, grows to the next thing, and people come together. I mean, crowdfunding is a perfect example. Crowdfunding is about people coming together to make an idea happen. And that's what that was. I actually ended up licensing this product to a company in Boulder called Night Eyes. And since then, they've actually licensed a whole bunch more products, which is really exciting. And that in turn gave me the flexibility upon getting out of school to do really whatever I wanted. Which has in turn turned into even more, which is this company that I'm now working on called Ethic. And Ethic it's a product design and development firm, but the whole creative slant is that it uses a mix between software and hardware and like hard process in order to come up with amazing ideas for everyday products. So for instance, one of the things we do is we use Amazon and e-commerce data that we pull in the boatloads, and we sort through it with software algorithmically to pull out insights. And those insights are like, hey, we can redesign the ice scraper, or we can redesign the cutting board in really, really cool and compelling ways. And that was facilitated both by my Stanford background and by my woodworking background and by my product design background, and all of those pieces that you saw before coming together into something that's now, I think, going to be a very, very cool, compelling, and successful business, I should hope so. So, kind of in summary, it's cool to see how something as small as Lunchtime, you know, a few $100s allocated towards the project that you know I wanted to take hold of, I wanted to take responsibility for, and make into something, in turn matured through all those steps and has since become something that I think can grow much, much bigger, much, much more exciting. So small steps leading to some middle steps, leading to larger steps, and you know I think it only goes up from here.